Hi, everyone, and welcome to Alpine Intel's The Savvy Adjuster podcast, where we discuss the property loss topics important to adjusters with the experts who know them best. I'm your host, Marketing Product Specialist Whitney Bowles. Alpine Intel is an industry leader in property assessments and innovation through our operating brands, HVACI, StrikeCheck, National Fire Experts, Donan, and Component Testing Laboratories. You can find more information about these service offerings and additional resources at alpineintel.com, linked in the show notes. We're here to share key points with insurance professionals about various property topics, including today's focus, solar equipment investigations. A quick disclaimer before we get started. We're going to be talking today in general investigation and insurance terms. Each property failure is unique, which is why it's so important to get an assessment to make sure you have the facts for your claims. I'm joined today by Alpine Intel's Technical Education Manager, Jay Dykstra, and Donan Senior Forensic Engineer, Gary Woodall. Thank you both for being here. Jay, let's start with you. Would you mind telling us about your background in the industry and with solar specifically?
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Whitney, for having me on today. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. So my background's as an insurance adjuster. So I worked in the field for many years, outside adjuster, residential and commercial adjusting. And then from there, I became a claims trainer for a large insurance carrier. And I trained on all things, including helping develop some solar mock-ups in our training center there. So I had some background as well training with that. And then for the last 5.5 years, I've been the technical education manager here at Alpine Intel and developed over 20 technical courses, including a solar panel course, which I think we're going to link to as well today and refer to maybe just a little bit. And we've had over 2,000 attendees attend that course even in the last couple of years. And on a more personal note, and I think is kind of makes me uniquely qualified, is I have 26 solar panels on my roof, and I've had them for about 10 years. And I've been very lucky that I've actually generated more electricity than I've used. So it's been a really good thing for me as well. And I'm certainly sold on how it works for me.
And Gary, you're an electrical engineer. Can you talk a bit about that and how solar fits into your expertise?
Yes, thank you, Whitney. I'm a senior forensic engineer for Donan. I'm also a certified fire and explosion investigator. And I'm a licensed professional engineer with an electrical engineering specialty. I'm located in Southern Indiana, graduated from Purdue University with a degree in electrical engineering. I've been with Donan for almost 24 and a half years. And my background has been with the Air Force Space Systems as a launch control officer, 20 years with the Navy as a civilian engineer, working with nuclear submarine systems, worked as a contractor, doing electrical design and material handling and processing systems, and then again with Donan as a forensic engineer. From both an engineering standpoint and a fire perspective, solar panels and inverters can be damaged by lightning, which is a good part of my background, and power surges, as well as having fires. And we can talk about that a little bit later in the program.
Well, you've both had pretty exciting careers. So let's start by talking about why it's important for adjusters to know the basics of solar equipment. Are these claims becoming more frequent, in your opinion?
I can take that one, and I've done some research on this as far as the class we lead as well. They're definitely becoming more frequent, basically because there's more solar panels out there. There's more residential solar. Of course, there's more community and commercial solar as well. But some of the last research we did is estimated about 5% of homes in the United States now have solar panels associated with them. And they're expecting that to grow by 40 or 50% yearly until we get to 13 or 15% of homes by the year 2030. And that's really not that far away. There are other states out there that are pushing it harder than others, and you can probably take a guess. California actually has some regulations in place as far back as 2020 that says brand new residences being built have to have solar associated with them. I think that also applies for small apartment buildings too, up to 3 stories. So that's why we're seeing more claims, basically because there's a lot more solar out there. So I think it just kind of goes with the territory of properties and seeing damages and more panels out there.
So when an adjuster gets a new solar equipment claim, what considerations should they account for when deciding if they need an expert assessment?
Well, I think primarily is, if the claim is within probably 10 years of usage because of the age of repose, at least in Indiana and many other states. Also, if it's a lightning claim, a power surge issue, if there's a fire, could be roof damage, other aspects there. And if they need somebody to do testing, we have qualified technicians can do that. And we're just ready to serve.
Gary, could you talk a little more about what age of repose means and why that's significant?
Well, age of repose is the number of years typically that we can go for subrogation. And of course, the insurance company is interested in subrogation. They'll have a payout of a claim, and they're interested in getting the money back. So if the fault is a material fault, if it's a contractor installation fault, it could be a utility problem of some sort. And so your age of repose, again, in Indiana and many other surrounding states, it's 10 years. And that's the best time frame that they can go back and try to reclaim some of the cost of what they pay out on their claims.
So then it's really kind of important that adjusters make the decision to get an expert assessment quickly, sooner rather than later, so that they don't run into this problem.
Absolutely, yes.
Are there any safety considerations that they need to think about?
Well, of course, if it's a residential installation, then if you climb on roofs, you need to be safe as far as using a ladder. If you're climbing on a roof, you need to have the proper shoes to be able to walk on the roof. Tie off your ladder, keep it from slipping. Also, we're dealing with voltages, and it doesn't take very much of a voltage or current to get a shock. And if a person's shocked, they might fall off the roof. So those are issues. And again, it's better to have, if testing is an issue or a question, it's better to have a qualified technician to do the testing. If it's an inverter, it could be a string inverter, which the solar panels are tied together, daisy chained into a string, and your inverter will be on the side of the house typically. And if there's electronic damage from lightning or power surge, then there's voltage present. And again, you've got the potential for shock, for electrocution. And so a person needs to have the proper test equipment and the personal protection equipment also to protect themselves.
So it's really best for everyone involved that you have someone who has the right personal protective equipment on hand, understands how to deal with some reasonably dangerous equipment, and, just really knows what they're doing. Jay, would that also come into play with identifying the equipment? Does the layperson know what they're looking at if they take the risk of climbing up on the roof and checking it out themselves?
So absolutely. I was going to add on to that. So thanks for bringing that in. From an adjuster standpoint, it's imperative to understand what you're looking at, right? Identifying this equipment. Gary alluded to inverters. There's different types of inverters. There's different types of panels. There's different sizes of panels. There's different efficiencies of panels. And all of those things are going to play into, if you're an adjuster and you're estimating, you need to know all those things, and probably not things you can get on your own. So having an expert help you with that is very important. And then as you follow through that claim process, you're getting into making decisions on what is damaged. Gary talked about having it tested, which you have to do and an adjuster cannot do. Then you have to make a decision on repair versus replace. And every adjuster in the world knows that term, right? So are they repairable? Do you have to replace some of them? Do you have to replace all of them? How is that going to work, right? You have to have the accurate pricing on that. And then to kind of put on top of all of that, a lot of estimating softwares that are used by adjusters out there, and from my personal experience, they're not very either accurate or even include the needed items you need to work on a claim like this. So I think that goes back to answering your question on why you're going to probably want to get some help on something as technical and in-depth and challenging and dangerous as a solar panel claim.
Well, Gary and Jay, you've both alluded to the need for expert testing. Gary, could you tell us what some of that testing might entail and maybe why it's something that an expert needs to do?
Certainly. Testing of solar panels and solar systems takes specialized equipment to really cover all the bases. You'll test the output voltage in a DC or direct current fashion. DC is like a battery voltage of a car battery or a flashlight battery. It's not alternating current AC like your house requires, but test equipment will be something like maybe a Seaward PV210, which will test using a Megger test up to 1,000 volts DC. It'll measure open circuit voltage, short circuit current, radiance testing, and interpret whether the panels are operating correctly or less than ideal conditions. It stores the data, and the test equipment you dump it into a spreadsheet later. And the first thing to do, of course, is opening disconnects or breakers and making it as safe as possible. But also important, as I said, using voltage-rated gloves or arc flash PPE if needed. It will test, again, the DC output, the short circuit current, and Megger testing of the DC leads.
All right. Well, so we've identified our equipment. We've done our tests. Jay, you've alluded to repair versus replacement recommendations. Would an adjuster expect to see that the majority of them will be repairable or replaceable? Is there going to probably be a mix in there?
One of our great answers in this world is it depends. So it's going to depend on a lot of things. Is how old is this equipment, right? If you have a real old array of equipment that's damaged or a few panels damaged, you may not be able to get like kind and quality equipment to go back in there with it. So in that case, maybe you're replacing more panels than you would have expected to if only a few of them are affected. There has been many solar companies and solar brands that have come and gone. Right. So there's actually some brands out there that don't, they're on people's houses now, they're getting damaged, but they don't exist anymore. So you can't get them. So in cases like that, you may be replacing more than you would want to. Some of it might be on age, some of it might be on efficiencies and things like that. So it's really going to depend on each and every claim, each and every scenario, each and every system and the way it's set up. But there's a fair amount of times you're going to do a repair. You have 3 or 4 panels that maybe got affected, whether it got hit by a tree or hail or surge damage perhaps, and you just replace those panels. And there's other times you have a few damage and you have to maybe replace that entire array of 10 or 12 panels in that array. So another reason to get help, because it's a lot of time not visual damage. And you're going to need someone to tell you what's right, what's wrong. Are they available? Are they not available? Again, the estimating softwares aren't helping you a lot in that case. It's, even if there is a line item, it's just a line item in a piece of software. It's not telling you if it's actually available. So from an adjuster standpoint, it's going to depend. And you're going to want to make sure you understand the full ramifications and someone you can trust to help you make those decisions.
Do the adjusters need to think about the price of solar panels and other related equipment when they are making claims decisions?
Absolutely. So everything about handling claims is the term out there in the industry. And from when I was handling claims is, the company's going to say, we pay what we owe. Right? You don't want to underpay and you don't want to overpay. So pricing is critical, and pricing can range tremendously on solar power equipment, at least from my personal experience. And there's times when things are overquoted and things like that. So you're going to want to make sure you're pricing it correctly. Sometimes maybe they just want a detach and reset price. The panels aren't actually damaged, but we have to move those for some reason to work on the roof for a roof claim or something like that. That pricing can range significantly as well. So you're definitely going to want to make sure you're looking at your pricing closely. And of course, we can't forget about depreciation in this pricing as well. Do we know the age of these panels? Do we know the condition of these panels and things like that? So they can apply the policy coverage of depreciation and get that actual cash value settlement appropriate.
Let's say, Jay, that someone is leasing the solar panels on their house rather than owning it. If that gets damaged, who's responsible for replacing them?
Again, each lease could be a little bit different. Different companies out there have done different types of leases. But overall, I'm glad you brought that up because in some of the training I do, I encourage all adjusters, one of the first things to do in a solar power claim is to ask the homeowner or the policy owner, do you own these panels or are you leasing these panels? It could make a huge difference. Then we go on to say, if there is a lease involved, we need to see the lease, we being the adjusters. We need to see the lease and read the part that's either, in a subcategory called damages or even insurance. And each lease will spell out who is the responsible party in case of damages, right? Sometimes it will be the lease company that they are going to cover that because in reality, they own those panels, right? But other times, no, they have passed on the risk to the homeowner. So you'd have to look at that each and every time. But certainly what you don't want to do is pay for an adjustment of panels that somebody else is responsible for via a contract or a lease. So critical that they ask that question up front, get a copy of it if there is a lease, and handle the claim appropriately from there.
So it sounds like there is a lot that goes into figuring out if a claim needs to be paid out, how much it needs to be paid out, who's responsible for the equipment to begin with. Jay, can you explain what it means to detach and reset the solar panel equipment And would a carrier need an assessment partner to help them with that?
Sure thing. And I know I mentioned that in my last comment, and sometimes I throw some things out there and don't give all the background on it. So there are certainly those times where these panels now end up being in the way, right? They're either on the roof, whether it's a commercial roof or a residential roof, and there's some other part of the claim that needs to have them moved to address it. That could be roof damage, that could be something else, right? So you have to determine what level of detach and reset do we need, right? Are we just taking off the panels off the racking and seeing and getting some work done, or are we taking all the racking off as well? So the racking is actually physically bolted in and through the roof to the framing members, and that's a pretty significant job. And again, it's going to depend on pricing, and you're going to want to get some help. Is this a one-story ranch house with a little pitch, like a 4-pitch, meaning not very steep? Or is this a 2 or 3-story house with a 10-12 or a very steep pitch? It's going to price, will range wildly on that. Do we need special equipment? Do we need a lift? Do we need a crane? Do we need something like that? So, again, I think a partner to help you make all those determinations, get that pricing right. And just to add one more thing on there, not to go too long, but what do we do with all that stuff once we take it down, right? We may have to have a week or two to work on this roof. Are we storing them somewhere? Do we have to keep them safe? Do we have to keep people away from them? Do we have to, take them to an offsite storage site? There's a lot of things you might not think of that come into play when we're talking about, even something that sounds simple as detach and reset, take them off and put them back on. When you go to put them back on, you also might have to have new parts to the racking. They have new hardware that goes in. Again, these things all have to be waterproof. So whether you're sealing all those things, doing new things with the roof surface, or caulking everything, that sort of stuff. So it can be pretty involved with something that sounds as simple as detach and reset, take them off and put them back. So I think you definitely want to pay attention to those scenarios as well and get that pricing right as well.
So obviously solar panels and solar panel equipment is really complicated. It's something that a lot of people are not going to be super familiar with, partly because that equipment is really fairly new technology. So we obviously can't go into all the workings and components of solar power equipment and systems, but fear not, listeners, we will link a webinar in the show notes. The webinar will contain a lot of great information from Jay about solar power equipment, including the various parts of it. But if you two were making a glossary of 5 to 10 terms adjusters need to know, could you give us a brief rundown of what that might include?
How about if I start and I'll throw a couple out there, and I'm going to have Gary come in and talk a little bit more about it from the technical side of it as well. So what type of panels are we talking about? And again, I'll throw this one back to Gary. Photovoltaic or solar thermal collector. And we got to be careful because adjusters and people sometimes just say, I have solar panels. Well, solar thermal collectors are heating water. And I think today's conversation, we're really talking about ones that generate electricity. And Gary alluded to AC versus DC and those inverters. And kind of what's the difference between a solar cell and a solar panel array and things like that. So, Gary, why don't you, as the electrical engineer, take that conversation just a little bit further and talk about some of that stuff.
Certainly. Thank you very much. The solar panel, of course, is made up of many, many solar cells. And solar panels are called photovoltaic or PV panels. Solar cells are called PV cells. And PV cells actually collect the sunlight and use that to convert that to a DC power. DC power, again, is like a battery power. And then the inverter will convert that to your AC. For your house, you have 120 or 240 volts. And so your inverter converts that over. As far as the solar cells are designed, they're made up of P-type semiconductors and N-type semiconductors. And the P-type can easily accept electrons, and the N-type will share or provide spare electrons for the P-type material. Silicon is a material, a semiconductor material that's commonly used. You may relate to Silicon Valley in California, where a lot of electronics are manufactured. But a solar cell is activated by sunlight again and transfers electrons in the form of DC current, creating a DC voltage. And you're probably familiar with LED lights, light emitting diodes, where the voltage causes a cell to give off light. And solar panels actually work in the opposite way, using sunlight or solar power to produce the voltage. So this is the process. We talk about string type of inverters, which can be used both on a house or in commercial. You have probably seen solar fields as you travel along the highway, where there are many, many solar panels and string type inverters that convert the DC into your AC power. Jay, what types of inverters have you experienced with the solar panel systems?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and I think the string inverters you're talking about are the more common from my perspective and my background, and that's what I had first at my house, and very common. What's becoming more common are these micro inverters. So micro inverters, instead of transferring that energy from DC electricity to AC, for mini panels, a micro inverter does it for one panel at a time. So by the time the electricity leaves one panel, it's already in the needed AC format for the home. Those tend to be more efficient, but they're also more expensive overall. So some people don't opt to buy those up front because they're more expensive, but it is coming much more common. Solar in general is coming down in price, just like a lot of things do with technology. The better we get at it, the more people that are doing it, and things like that, the prices are coming down. So that's another reason more and more people are getting it as well, because used to be a standard person maybe couldn't afford it now, and there's a lot of incentives to do it as well. So that is what's going on with the inverters. So you definitely have to know which type you have. That's a price driver, and want to make sure we certainly get that right.
So, Gary, when you're called out to inspect a solar claim, what's your process to identify the cause of loss?
Well, there's a lot of questions to ask to begin with. Is storm damage related, like hail damage or high winds, where pieces of debris can be airborne and damage the glass on the panels themselves? If it's hail damage, how large of hail was in the area? Typically, 1.5 inch diameter hail or greater can damage glass, and so that's the type of thing that can happen. When was the system installed? When did the insured start noticing the degrading of their power that they're generating? Did it happen all of a sudden, or did it happen over a period of time? And does the insured have 4 to 6 months of electric use records? Those type of things. Has a contractor been called? What did the contractor say the problem is? Has there been repairs made to system and how recently are those repairs. Then if hail's damage, then what kind of collateral damage do we see in aluminum? Soft aluminum will show up that hail damage too, and be an indicator for it. As far as testing is concerned, again, from the panel standpoint, testing the DC output. Does it have the proper output, or has it been degrading over a period of time? Do you have with a house? Do you have a large tree that's going to shade it part time? If you're in a city, do you have a lot of birds, pigeons, and pigeon dropping? Geese. I've seen around Indianapolis in particular, they have little ponds many places, and there's a lot of geese around that will give droppings and degrade the panel output. As far as testing the inverter, again, do it safely, but can be electronic damage from power surge or from lightning, as far as that's concerned. Our fuse is blowing. Have they been tripping circuit breakers? Those kind of things can give you an indicator, and that's kind of a nutshell of the type of things that we're looking at and questions we're asking.
Jay, what kind of causes of loss do you think that an expert like Gary might be finding when they inspect solar panels?
That's a good one. He's been hitting on them. It might depend where you are in the country. So if you're up in the Northeast, you're not going to see as many like hail claims. If you're in hail country or wind country, we'll have windstorms, tornadoes, and things like that. So a lot of it, since they're outside, are weather related. So we talked about hail. We talked about flying debris, impact by trees and branches, wind. Are they getting blown off in hurricanes or tornadoes and things like that? They really shouldn't be blowing off in standard windstorms unless they're not installed properly, and that's a whole nother issue we would have to deal with. But there's also some, and of course, lightning and surge. That's a huge one because it's an electrical component, and that's always going to be one of the top ones. But there's other things out there that you just don't think about. Theft and vandalism, right? They're not stealing so many of these because it's not like copper where they take it for the money, but they do vandalize them, especially ground arrays. People are shooting them with paint guns or they're graffitiing them and things like that. We've seen those claim scenarios. But here's an odd one that I actually use as one of my examples that you wouldn't think water damage would be a thing with solar panel claims, right? So because it's designed to be outside. We had one where they were claiming storm damage because it stopped working after a storm. They didn't know why. And here's what happened. The wires coming off the panels on the roof had they had a junction box and a penetration in the roof with conduit that went straight down into the basement, and that's where their inverter was. Guess what? It wasn't put together properly. It wasn't sealed properly. When it rained, the water went down the conduit from the roof into the inverter and shorted out the inverter with water. So just when you think you might know everything that might be going on with a causal loss in solar, you might want to make sure you know actually what happened, because that particular case, it was water damage. So it pretty much runs the gamut of what can happen. I would say probably weather and surge are the ones we tend to see the most.
Jay, you said that you have your own solar powered equipment. Your own solar array. Have you had any problems with yours?
Unfortunately, yes. So I have 26 panels up on my roof, and I have one part of my roof that comes down pretty low, and there's a tree there. Guess what? We all deal with squirrels, or I'm assuming a lot of us deal with squirrels. So panels on a roof, I'm in New England where it snows, what a great place to live in the wintertime if you're a squirrel. You can live under these panels. They're protected. You have some heat coming off the roof. And so I ended up with squirrels building nests under my panels. And then it ended up they were chewing the wires. Why they chew the wires, I don't know. But I have an example of a wire where they chewed all the way through the insulation, all the way into the core wire. So maybe Gary can answer whether they can get electrocuted or not. I don't know if they're grounded or not when they're on the roof, and maybe they were chewing at night when there's no sun out, but they chewed all the way through. I had to have a company come out, take not all the panels, but a lot of the panels off to expose the ones where the squirrel nests were, and it was more than one, clean it all out, fix those wires and put them back together. And since then, guess what I've had to do? I've had to put up squirrel guards around my panels so they don't continue to go under there, because they're very they'll just keep coming back and trying. And so I had to put squirrel guards on to keep them out from going under there. So that was my experience. And again, kind of a costly mistake. I probably should have put the squirrel guards up to begin with, because someone had warned me about it and I didn't think it was going to happen, and it did. So
I have to admit, I wasn't expecting to hear the term squirrel guards used in a sentence today, Jay. Gary, can you talk about any of the claims you've seen or assessed? Maybe dealing with municipal solar farms?
I have an IMPA case that's going on right now, where a large solar farm for a city was reportedly having lightning damage. And interestingly about it, they had 122 inverters, and after the storm, the inverters started failing on them, and before they shut all the panels down, there was only 24 out of the 122 that were still operating. So there were a few of them that actually caught fire and burned. And so those are issues, and both from an electrical standpoint and from a fire standpoint, those were issues that I had to take a look at and evaluate. Also, hotspots are seen on panels. And hotspots can be caused by poor matching of cells. It can be caused by shading. It can actually cause hotspots where some of the bypass diodes may fail on it, and actually contribute to that, or cause the hot spots. And so that's a failure that we've looked at also.
Thank you again for sharing your expertise about solar panels with us. It sounds like this knowledge base will be more and more useful to adjusters as the technology becomes more popular and widespread. And thanks to all of our listeners for listening to this episode. You can find additional materials about solar equipment and related topics in our show notes, as well as on alpineintel.com. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss an episode. And if you have property claims that need assessments, you can submit an assignment to our website or get more details about how our suite of services can bring you the answers you need to feel confident about your settlement decisions. We'll see you next time.